Good afternoon, good afternoon. Welcome to today's TechCentral webinar. And I am honored to have with me Conrad Steyn. Conrad is the CTO and Head of Engineering at Cisco Sub-Saharan Africa. And he's a business partner to BCX EXA. BCX EXA is being represented by Nkosi Kumalo, who's the Managing Executive of BCX EXA. And we are absolutely thrilled to be jumping into a topic that is very, very close to everybody's minds at the moment. They spent some time unpacking what 2021 involved. They spent some time understanding what 2022 needs to involve. And I think businesses are under immense pressure at the moment. There's a need to perform. There's a need to connect. Delivery expectations are high. The regulatory environment is something we always need to consider. Data migration, cybersecurity, network agility are just a few of the enablers that are top of mind. They certainly are with me, and they certainly are with a lot of our listeners I know. And I'd like to thank the both of you for joining us, because we're all too familiar with what automation means. But in today's context that I've just outlined, what is robotic process automation? And where does this topic of SD-WAN and Wi-Fi 6, how does that enable robotic process automation, or the acronym RPA? And I'd like to jump straight into it. And Nkosi, would you mind just kicking us off and letting us know where to start on this topic of RPA?
Yeah, thank you very much for a nice introduction. And how are you, Conrad? So really, robotic process automation is really that, right? It's an automation capability that is enabled by robots, or call it bots. Yes, you will find a situation where most people would have their own bots that are walking around either in their own houses and all that. But the reality in this case is about agents that we put into a technology or in a customer environment. And these agents, they basically mimic repetitive tasks that are conducted by an individual in the business. And they basically take over those tasks based on how they learn and make sure that they improve from a speed point of view. So in essence, the tasks that are done by a warm body can be taken over by these bots to make sure that from a process point of view, they are efficient, they are effective, and they save a lot of time, whilst they obviously provide value and a level of creativity for the business.
Okay, now this sounds a fascinating topic, and I think we're going to have to unpack this a hell of a lot more before I am comfortable with what you've really just described. And I'm sure our listeners are hanging on tenterhooks to understand that better. When you say the business processes, you're talking about the development on the back end, the business integration, or the actual delivery of product?
So let's put it simply, right? And I don't want us to think about it from a development and a whole host of tasks. We're probably having audience right now from a banking sector. And when you think about some of the tasks that are being done in a bank, so you would look at a home loan application, a process of onboarding a client,
okay.
Right? You have got a form that is quite repetitive amongst different clients that you bring on board. In there, the form is standard. It has got the same set of questions. And you have to have a person that actually fills in those questions, and ultimately the form is filled correctly without any errors. A bot can take those repetitive tasks of filling in that form and basically remove the human element in that tasks that is repetitive. So this is really just putting it simply without complicating it with development and integration and all that. So this is what robotic process automation, we are automating the process of onboarding a potential client for home loan in the case. I hope it's clarified.
I like that. And do you mind if I use an analogy, and tell me if I'm wrong, but would an example of KYC, know your customer, would that be an example where RPA would step in and perhaps speed up or remove the exacerbating frustration of both the terminal user and the client?
Absolutely. So, if an organization has got a standard set of rules that they've put down to make sure that they understand who their client is, RPA works better in repetitive tasks, right? So you've got a set of steps that you have to follow to ultimately get to know your client, where you've got a standard set of questions or certain tasks that have to be performed. Certainly, RPA works better, works easier, but it doesn't mean that you cannot give the bot responsibility for a little bit of complex tasks. So it can go beyond just the simple tasks, for as long as you can be patient with it and understand that as you develop it and you allow it to go into certain areas beyond the standard set of tasks, and with the repeated work, it ultimately takes over and it's able to navigate. There's also an opportunity to actually build in intelligence onto the bot, where you can actually start getting it to be a little bit more intuitive. It starts finding better ways to say, no, man, why would I have to go through these 3 steps to ultimately get to know my client when I can just move 2 steps and I'm there? So it's really quite effective. And I mean, if you want to use it for know your client type of exercise, absolutely can work. Yeah.
Super, thank you. And I'll come back to some relevant local examples and ask you to elaborate later on during this conversation. What I'd like to do is weave this topic together and understand, Conrad, especially from your side, network agility is a key enabler for growth, for security, for long-term sustainability. Can you talk to us about SD-WAN and Wi-Fi 6?
Yes, sure. So in the context of RPA, if we look at it today, I mean, SD-WAN really brings business agility, right? It brings on-premise security and cloud-delivered SASE together. It allows all of these financial services and institutions to connect the multiple cloud environments onto one single fabric. Now, what this means is it brings true resiliency to the financial services organization. So uptime extends around the applications. It's always available. They securely connect across the secure Cisco SD-WAN infrastructure to that infrastructure and environment. And what this also means now is we have true insights and visibility into all of these application performance. With that, obviously, we can also use AI and machine learning through our Cisco Workload Optimizer, to understand what the impact is on this application, the performance, how do we actually offload and provide the right resources when it becomes constrained. So it's almost using automation to extend and improve the capabilities and the performance of RPA, for example. And that's really where the benefit comes together. I mean, extending it onto Wi-Fi 6, for example, I mean, if we look at it from a 2.4 gigahertz technology point of view, there was no true updates in the last 10 years. Wi-Fi 6 brought a whole lot of new enhancements, brought speed, brought new interoperability capabilities, and other external features, which we can talk about a bit later on around visibility, insights, etc., that now applies to financial services and how they manage this digital experience for the customers within the retail branch.
You know what is funny is that as you are talking about the network and some of the services that you offer in terms of network monitoring, network management, and I mean, I just thought about an RPA relevance in that space, right? Because, as people are sitting there in that operating center and monitoring the network, I mean, your network is quite intelligent, right? It's able to look at areas where there are bursts and it's able to self-correct and all that, which is really great about the latest technology. But think about a RPA process that is actually allowing you to know exactly, should there be a burst, what actually happens. A human being would have probably intervened and say, all right, let us look at this application that is absolutely consuming so much. Why is it doing that? The bot can actually take over the type of task and be able to give you a very good report over time. So this is really where technology is going. And I find it quite a relevant conversation to actually merge the relevance of RPA and the relevance of network capability to see how you could leverage and actually run a more productive and intelligent shop, right?
Yeah. So we're automating our automation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks. Conrad, I think what you've also clearly defined here is that there's an application in the middle and a process. But without the network, actually, I suppose it's really a trifecta. Without the three, they can't operate together. And that's why BCX and Cisco have the relationship you do.
Yes, that's correct, yes. I think it's very important. I think applications during this pandemic has really become the heart of any business, right? In financial services, all of the financial services migrated overnight into this digital experience and application-first experience. On the back of that, your application needs to deliver the best experience. If you have poor experiences in an application, your end users will actually move away to where they get a better experience and a better service at the end of the day. And, coming back to Nkosi's statement earlier, is really now around taking that legacy knowledge base that existed traditionally in legacy contact centers and customer experience executives interfacing with the end user, through call centers and all other mediums, which has now truly been automated, integrated into the digital application. But now it's really, really important for the financial services institution to make sure that the end user has the best experience. And to do that, they need to have all three components, as you mentioned, come together. And ultimately today, the requirement for this financial service organization is something that we call full stack observability. Today, they need to understand when this end user accesses the application, from that endpoint, be it a mobile device, a PC, etc., all the way to the application, either in the on-premise data center or the cloud. What is the constraint? Where's the bottleneck, etc.? And that's we provide that full visibility and insight. Through our App Dynamics platform, we can actually see all of that, track all the context directly into the database. Now, in a lot of environments today, a lot of this traffic goes across the public internet, and you don't necessarily have any insights into that traffic. Through our Thousand Eyes acquisition, we actually have full-blown visibility across the public internet. We have agents deployed across the public data centers, etc., across the internet, which provide us with all of that data and information. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I think through our Intersite Workload Optimizer tool, we understand where all of these virtual machines, applications, and resources sit within the public data center or private data center. And if there's a constraint, through AI and the machine learning capabilities in the product, we're able to move resources around between on-premise and public hyperscaler data centers to provide and optimize those resources. But then also, lastly, I think it's the security around that application, right? And being financial services is really where App Dynamics secure application comes into there, where we encrypt and secure all of this traffic end to end. I think that's really important now, and all of the financial services organizations that's getting this right is pulling all of the digital customers across today through this innovation.
Okay, thanks. So what we've done is we've unpacked what RPA is. We've unpacked, and I'd like to go into a bit more detail of what you've just described, or perhaps even ask you to repeat that, Conrad, because it's clearly integral to the delivery of RPA. We've unpacked the two aspects that the two of you are representing today. We talk about financial institutions, and we understand that they're facing some challenges, and we understand that they're adapting, they're transforming, they're going through a lot of change. And you were talking about customer earlier, and the customer being the center of that trifecta that I described is true business agility. What are some of the challenges that the financial institutions are facing in 2022?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, if you think about it as an individual today, I'll give you my personal experience. My mom is staying a little bit far from me, and where she is, there's no banking facility that are close by. She's not bankable, right? We're sitting in a situation where we have to continue to look after her and send money from time to time.
Sure.
The ability for people to access money and they are not bankable is the biggest risk and a challenge for most of the banks, right? And if we start looking at adjacent industries that are starting to encroach in what is potentially a bank's future customer who is not bankable today, and because of the processes and the requirements from a banking point of view, other adjacent industries like retailers, the telecoms, mobile operators are starting to really break the walls of what a bank actually is. Today you can go to a retail store, you go into a money market part of a retail store and be able to do that transaction where you send money and you receive money,
Absolutely.
This is the biggest challenge for the banks right now, where you find that people don't actually need a traditional bank to be able to do banking transactions. And to be honest with you, this is technology-enabled capability to be able to render that kind of service to the unbanked community. You know, if you think about things like e-wallet and money transfers, those things are enabled by Conrad's network, and they're also enabled by an application, right? And when I used to work for a bigger software company, they used to really ingrain it in us that applications drive experiences. When you want to drive and improve a customer experience, make sure that the app that people interface with actually delivers against the expectation of the client. And this is really where the whole thing starts, because once you engage with an app, and there are certain ways in which you have to navigate to be able to deliver your own experience, certainly you leverage off the technology that is emerging, like RPA and a whole host of others that can enable you to tap into markets that you would not have gone into had you not been in a situation that you find yourself in now. So I think banks are quite challenged. We've seen, some of the big banks in South Africa having retrenched thousands and thousands of people last year. It's a fact that profitability is under pressure, growth is not coming, and of course, you have got efficiencies that they are trying to really drive in the bank. So I think there are bigger challenges. Conrad, I don't know what you see out there, but the banks are really under the storm of disruption. And I can tell you now, even the growing banks, the newer banks that are coming in, they're really just disrupting this whole apple cart. And I can tell you comfortably now, the 4 big banks in South Africa are looking at different ways of engaging between me and you. Some of them are a little bit ahead of each other. Some of them are still coming. But yeah, I can tell you, even us here sitting in this call, I don't know how many of us have actually gone to the bank more than 5 times in the last 6 months.
Not many.
It just tells you that things are changing and technology is driving the way we want to engage with the banks.
True. Yeah.
Thanks, Nkosi. I know you touched on the change that's happening within banks, and it's unfortunate to see a lot of the job losses that are happening. But at the same time, hiring is also slowed. A lot of the best staff and the skills are being reallocated. There's an overburden on those skills, especially with practicing the new sort of hybrid work model. And I think what you're saying is that automation serves an important purpose. And yes, it is challenging the status quo because it's about time it did.
And I tell you, maybe the question that you really want to ask me, which is, I think the audience cannot wait to ask. You're driving digital transformation, you're talking technology, but technology ends up costing people jobs. Right? And depending on who you talk to, they will give you different reasons why. But let me give you a sense. If you start looking historically and you look at the key industries that were quite prominent, I think if I remember top of my head, agriculture used to be one of the biggest industries since the beginning of industries in South Africa, or should I say globally. You also look at probably the big steel industries and all those. But with the advent of the services industries from the 70s onwards, you started seeing an accelerated growth. And that services industry is still growing even today in terms of its ability to create jobs. But the jobs that are created by the services industry are not jobs that were delivered at the time. Milkman's job have gone extinct. Postman job have gone extinct. You could talk about VHS administrators. They're gone, right? The opportunity that is brought by digital transformation today, contrary to its job losses. Think about software developers, the data scientists, and a whole host of other newer jobs that are coming as a result of this. So it's really about how do you leverage this change upskill the people, and redirect their efforts towards other things that are really a requirement. I can tell you now that a traditional bank today, if they are going to hold on to the staff and try and continue to do things the way they normally did, they will ultimately lose that whole business and ultimately have no one to employ. So the point I'm making is when you embrace digital transformation, you actually are likely to keep jobs, although it's different jobs. You are going to. How many companies do we know today that have gone off the face of the earth because they didn't want to really embrace change? So this is the reality that we are seeing around skill, job losses, and the opportunity that is brought by the change that we are seeing, especially in the banking sector.
I'm glad you've talked about this. I think it's close to our hearts. We all need to ensure that there's a modicum of human nature attached to what we're trying to achieve. And that change management and that the life cycle of transformation is something really important to involve in your planning. It's not to be pushed under the table because it doesn't suit sales. It's what needs to suit the human beings that are still involved and still required, but perhaps in a different guise, or perhaps be reallocated or upskilled or reskilled.
That's true. And Conrad, I'll give you a chance now, maybe just to throw in a word or two, but bringing this conversation back to RPA, you can understand the proximity of bots to human beings in terms of tasks and jobs, right? And it's likely that people will find it very difficult to actually allow a bot to take over his job. There is a very clear expectation to have an RPA strategy as a company, and this strategy can never, be real if you exclude HR in these conversations. So our company is already starting to think about a bot as an employee. How do you handle a bot as an employee, right? I mean, these bots are working 24/7. They never take lunch. They never take leave. How does a HR person embrace bot as part of its employee structure so that you can balance the contribution of the bot and the contribution of human beings? Because you can never have a situation where human beings are not required anymore. It's like this dream that we've been sold about a paperless environment in the technology space. We are still here and we're pushing paper even today.
I must say, just before I hand over to Conrad, I did very much read in preparation for this call that the subject matter experts behind your robotic process automation installation, if I can call it that, there's a skills share process involved there. There's very much a handover of expertise. So I think that in preparing for this conversation, the HR element is very much on the table and something that's close to BCX's heart.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Conrad, I just wanted to quickly ask you about legal regulations, automation behind the process, backward capability, and the legacy infrastructure that perhaps is some of the challenges that the financial institutions are dealing with, which might be your day-to-day headaches.
Yeah, I think, if we look at it where we're at today, I think obviously security is quite key in this environment. From a legal point of view, we've all seen POPIA, etc., come into effect last year. And I think what's very important right now is protecting personal information, all of that. And I think from an automation point of view, security has become the most critical aspect for any organization today as they've moved into this digital application first world. I think with that, we as Cisco focus quite heavily as the number one cybersecurity company in the world around our zero trust environment and architecture. And it's really one of our strength areas where, we've taken an entire architectural approach to our security, which really brings a combination of our industry-leading products, our services, our threat intelligence, which is world-leading with Cisco Talos, to help our customers reduce their complexity and drive that operational resilience within the environment and protecting the application, the data, everything complying from a legal point of view. I think on the back of that, as well, we're really focusing on taking this forward and driving this with all of the major institutions. That, unfortunately just doesn't only apply to financial services, but to all major organizations within South Africa at the time.
Yeah, security is a big thing, right? I mean, if you start looking at how many cybersecurity attacks we have seen in the past 2, 3 years, especially during the COVID time, yeah, definitely. I think you are touching on a very topical issue there, which really talks to how technology is actually embraced, including RPA, by the way. But we can talk about it once you get to it, James.
Yeah, what does that look like though, Conrad? So if you don't mind me asking the sort of practicalities of it. I'm a CTO, I know what I need to do, or at least I think I do. I'm engaging BCX, your BCX Gold partner who comes in and gives me this advice. Talk me through, what does that look like? How will you hold my hand through the process?
So I think for us, it's really to understand, right? So when we look at security and looking at this entire process, there's multiple facets around security. And also coming back to talking to SD-WAN and the perimeter changing, where we've now seen all of these applications have moved closer to the user, which we call secure access services edge, where everything has moved into the cloud. It's now been offloaded closer to the end user side of things. So we have to then work with the financial services organization to look at how do we look at perimeter security, cloud security, end user security. And then, in the zero trust model, there's really 3 areas that we focus on how you establish trust. And it's looking at trust establishment. So who's the user, who's the device, what's the device posture, what's the workload, what is the application and how do we trust that application? The second part of it is really how do you enforce the trust and the access to those applications, the network resources, and all of your workload communication, so you even secure that. And then lastly, it's really around, you need to continue this to establishing and enforcing the trust, right? So it's continuously verifying that this is trust-based, etc. So I think we have a security practice within BCX as our gold partner. They're one of the leading security partners in the country at the moment. And with their entire consultation practice, they would engage with our customer and take them through that process.
Okay, thank you for elaborating on that, because one of my questions is going to be, what level of automation can we put behind something that is of such high risk to the financial institutions, that being cybersecurity and compliance?
So a lot of it can be automated, right? So I think from an RPA point of view, it's really going out and testing all of these penetration environments. So when we look at penetration testing across all of these different perimeters, there is an automation component there. Through Cisco Talos, it's one of our biggest threat intelligence engines through AI and machine learning capabilities that we also leverage in this environment. And even from other environments as well within our security portfolio, everything is built around AI to automate that entire learning threat defense extension and maintaining that security perimeter around the user, the device, as well as the application.
Yeah, if I may just weigh in as well, if that's okay with you, James. The security practice in BCX, definitely, we've seen some interventions as well in the past few months where one or two other state-owned enterprises that found themselves really captured by the attackers. And BCX's interventions has actually helped them find a way of getting out of that environment and ultimately go back to business as usual. Now, the most important thing that probably your customers want to ask, or the audience, is where do I start? Conrad has shared so much capabilities around different security capabilities that are available within this basket of offering. But one thing that BCX can actually help with as well is the security threat assessment or even vulnerability assessment reports that we can actually do from a consultative point of view. So I can tell you now, if I go to any IT head and I start asking him about where are you exposed in terms of security, they actually don't know. It's probably most of the time kind of like, I just hope that everything works and nothing, just stops. But the most important thing that you really have to do if you want to kind of sleep better at night, not sleep well at night, because I don't think there's anything like that in IT. The point is, when you have an assessment report that says to you, You are vulnerable from a device point of view. You are vulnerable from an application, and these are the applications that are problematic. And you start putting a plan in place, and you start putting a roadmap of how do you get it to a solid state where you can ultimately be comfortable that it's foolproof and it's got the right standards. At least you can obviously leverage a partner like BCX who has got the network practice all the way through to the IT practice and the support. So someone who's able to actually give you the consultative capability and ultimately manage it for you. And this capability, we really pride ourselves in BCX. And I think there's a big opportunity for customers to engage us around that,
I'm quite entrepreneurial, and my head's just spinning with ideas inside and outside the financial space. But we talked earlier about full stack observability, and we talked about automation. To what extent are the two showing me a dashboard that gives me peace of mind, knowing that the user's behavior that's being recorded is positive behavior versus potential negligence or potential fraud, for instance? And can we talk a bit more about what you touched on earlier, Conrad, that full stack observability, please?
Yeah, sure. Full stack observability, as we provide it, is really moving beyond domain monitoring. Historically, you would have monitoring on the application, on the network, on the cloud infrastructure, etc. But there was no, as you mentioned, one single view to bring all of this together. Now, with full stack observability, we get visibility, we get insights and actions across all of the data. And when we say across all of the data, there will be application on whichever device it lives. As I mentioned then, the network piece being the public as well as the private network part. And then also from a cloud or on-premise data center virtualization environment, we have one single view across the entire engagement flow from the application directly into the data center hosted application. And all of that can also be secured. So through full stack observability, through our App Dynamics, our Thousand Eyes application, and our Cisco Intersight and Cisco Secure application, we provide you that visibility truly end to end. And that provides you with all of the actionable insights. So when an issue occurs, it's quickly and easily to just do a click and drill down to see where that issue arose from. But in the back end, you can actually leverage Cisco Intersight from a workload optimizer point of view to resolve that issue for you, which brings that automation into the product suite.
There's a lot to unpack there, and it seems you've got it covered. In order to reduce the vulnerabilities, reduce the attacks on the system, act more quickly to any potential threat, there's a dashboard of sorts and a report of sorts, which is perhaps going to prompt me without me needing to go and investigate, as I may have, considering my legacy infrastructure.
That's correct, James. And it's actually real time. So it's not historical. So, if I'm a user and I open up my banking application and it says to me, there's an issue here, try a bit later, that will automatically in real time be seen on the dashboard. And if it can be rectified through Intersight will automatically, through the integration into that dashboard and the Thousand Eyes and App Dynamics, understand where to go and reallocate resources to fix that constraint immediately, be it on-prem or cloud, and shift the workload requirements across the two in real time.
Okay. Brilliant. Thanks for explaining that. Nkosi, it looked like you wanted to say something. And can I just ask at the same time, when we're looking at recommendations, where to start, what things to consider before launching into the conversation of robotic process automation, what are some of the considerations or concerns of that tech individual or tech organization or tech division of a financial institution? What are they coming to you with typically? And could you give us some local example?
Yeah, I'll think about 4 or so. The first one, really, Conrad touched on the security aspect, right? Most of the people we engage around robotic process automation opportunities, the first thing they're asking us is, you're asking me to relinquish the human piece to it and give it to a technology to enable it? And how do I make sure that this thing is secured? Are you not exposing me from a security point of view? So that's really one of the conversations that we have. And security really talks to reputational damage that can come with it if it's not addressed correctly. And a lot of customers would also talk about the impact of this bot should things go wrong. The damage from a reputation point of view could really, really be big. How do you mitigate against that? And other things that the customers are talking about is the fact that there's a shortage of RPA talent, whether it's locally or globally. And once you start getting the business into this area where there's a big shortage of talent, how do you make sure that you are not putting yourself into a corner where you get the business to start operating through bots on autopilot? Ultimately, you don't have the skill should anything go wrong. And the last part that I also want to share, which is quite common, is, guys, where do I start? Which processes do I start to automate? And I always see that sometimes, you go in, you have a conversation with the client, and they take a bit of time before they come back to us, because they have to think about the right process to come back to us with and give us an opportunity to do a POC and actually prove whether this thing can work. As I said, there's a simple way in which you can roll out RPA, and there's a complex way in which. But when you are at a proof of case level, you have to be able to do it in such a way that it's quick enough, it's able to show you the returns, so that the representative in the organization can go back to the principals and say, look at this process. Look at what I've managed to do in a very short time, and be able to actually get into the bigger conversation in terms of the role RPA can play, in terms of just enabling what the business is looking at. So these are really normally the 4 areas that we normally engage with clients around. And it starts by that being absolutely clear in terms of what you want to do. And we normally find that going into the finance department and really being able to look at the journal entries, I normally find that some of those deals, they actually land quickly. We're able to show quick, BCX started actually in the finance department, where, for an example, if you look at our organization, we had so many companies that were under BCX group. And we did the consolidation exercise. Now think about it. Telkom acquired BCX. The 2 organizations coming in with 2 different processes, 2 different billing engines, 2 different ways in which we collect money and we pay people. Point here is, if a journal entry clerk is sitting here and has to go into multiple systems to be able to generate a statement for one client, you can already see the complexities there. This is where RPA comes in and say, all right, for you to be able to generate the statement, you normally go here, here, here. BCX was able to improve our journal entries by 11 times in terms of speed. Now think about the amount of time that you give to the journal entry clerk to actually start focusing on other things in terms of just doing quality checks and being able to write reports. So I think, realistically speaking, picking up the right one and addressing the rest of the things that I've mentioned, very, very important. Yeah.
That's a lovely example. I like the anecdote because it's true to so many different parts of our organizations, that we're run by money. That's the stem of our business, is the financial departments. And if we look at some of the processes behind them, they are run quite traditionally still. And I say that from the experience I've had in many different angles of consulting, is I see that the trust is something given last by someone who works in finance. And if you can get in and create those case studies and test cases, use case examples within finance, I think that you're onto a winning streak there. And I'd certainly welcome you to come and have a look at mine. What I'd like to do, though, is suggest that you started that conversation about trust. And it's very different to what Conrad was talking about, which is zero trust. And there's a relationship that BCX has with its clients. And then there's this hard and fast zero trust logic, which makes the world of sense. Where and what would you suggest would be my next steps in engaging BCX? And when would we start to bring Conrad in on the conversation so that we were, tackling this quite quickly going into the new year and actually being as agile as possible in adapting and transforming?
So I'll tell you one thing, right? Emerging technology is a topical issue within enterprise businesses. If you are not playing with something emerging, there are a lot of questions that are probably being asked of you as a responsible official within the company. When I talk about emerging technology, I'm talking about cloud, I'm talking about RPA, data science capabilities, and all those kind of things. If you are not touching any of those comfortably without any proof, I would tell you that there are conversations that have been had with you, and you have to always justify why you don't want to go cloud, why you don't want to go RPA. You can never escape that conversation. But it's also important to understand that you are not on your own. And there is no one-size-fits-all type of approach here. The fact that you've got a partner in BCX that is able to give you a thorough understanding on your network and being able to tell you the quality of your network and its readiness to actually take you to the next step is very important. The fact that you've got a partner that can be able to address you in terms of that network security requirement, taking it even further to say the infrastructure that sits on top of the network, be it a private cloud capability, be it's in the form of co-location where you can actually host in our data center as BCX, or we can manage environments in your own environment, workloads, and the ability to actually give you a cloud-enabled infrastructure play that allows you through a single pane of glass to move workloads between one environment to another. And now I'm actually taking you through the whole stack in terms of what BCX is relevant all the way through to business process automation and managed environment with service level agreements. I mean, we've got so much capability in BCX. I mean, we could talk the whole day.
Sounds it, yeah.
There's security, there's applications in there, there's data enabled, and the services as well that comes with the end user computing and stuff like that. So the point I'm really making here is when you choose a partner in terms of where you start, you want to choose a partner that is able to leverage its own capability to give you a one throat to choke capability where you are able to talk to one person and they can own your uptime because they actually have a 360 view of your business and they don't subcontract with anyone to be able to deliver that all-rounded capability. So this is really where I think customers will get a lot of value engaging with BCX purely because of the breadth of the capability.
Thanks, Nkosi. I think that was quite a nice way of summarizing what we've been talking about so far today. Conrad, is there a point that you wanted to make around what Nkosi's just been talking about and how the partnership leverages off each other and your positioning as the engineering services behind everything he's just described?
Yes, James. I think for us at Cisco, obviously our enterprise networking is a key part of our business. Looking at our software-defined access capabilities, which includes wireless capabilities, and then obviously our software-defined WAN capabilities. I think beyond that, we also have our entire collaboration portfolio. We have an entire data center portfolio that we also leverage, and then obviously our entire security portfolio. Our architectural approach to all of this coming together and, integrating into a cloud environment today as well, with the entire management suite around that, as well as our full stack observability, providing the visibility and insights to this entire portfolio. A key part for us as well is automation and programmability. And I think, we have a program there called Cisco DevNet, where we expose all of these APIs and integration points. And that's really as well where BCX is a systems integrator and gold partner from Cisco, leverages all of these environments and brings all of it together, as Nkosi just explained. And I think that's really where the partnership brings the strength of the entire architectural approach and systems integrator approach together for all of our financial services customers.
Thank you, Conrad. And I think that's perhaps quite a good place to put a bit of a bow on this conversation and wrap it up. I'm sure there's a lot more to be said, which is why one of the things we do at TechCentral is we facilitate further conversation. We're absolutely looking at some exciting further conversations with both of you during the course of this year. Some roundtables have been talked about, some topics that are other questions from the viewers that we've received so far are things that we perhaps weren't able to touch on today, but are and want to chat about around a table at some stage during the course of this year, in person, face-to-face is hopefully here and returning for those real conversations where we can get under the hood and talk about some local examples, have a look at some demonstration perhaps, and really get a good feel and kick the tires of what the two of you have been talking about today. So is there anything else either of you would like to say just in closing?
Yeah, thank you very much for this time. I really appreciate it, and we look forward to engaging with yourselves. And I guess our details will be shared, and we will be reaching out to some of you via LinkedIn to obviously connect further. So thank you very much.
I think from my side as well, James and Nkosi, thanks for everything today. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and looking forward to those upcoming sessions and events. Thanks very much.
Super. Thank you very much, both of you. I certainly took a lot away from that. I think that we all hear a lot of acronyms in the market at the moment. We understand that we should have our finger on the pulse. And unless we engage with the subject matter experts like the two of you, we're actually just somewhat floundering. So thank you very, very much for sharing your time and your insights and your knowledge. I can't wait for our next engagement. So from me, James Erasmus at TechCentral, it was an honor to have the two of you on the call today. And I really look forward to seeing where we can take this industry. Thank you very much indeed.